Our friends, the question today is, how do we find happiness at work? Well, Confucius, right? That wise old sage in China, he said this: choose a job that you love and you'll never have to work a day in your life. Now, what do you think about that? If Confucius is too old school for you, how about this? From Steve Jobs, no less, right? In his viral commencement speech in Stanford University, he said this: your work is going to fill a large part of your life. And the only way to be truly happy is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. How do we find happiness at work? Well, some people like Confucius and Steve Jobs, they tell us that the secret is to love our jobs, is to find our passion at work. Yet others tell us the complete opposite. An equally wise sage by the name of Aristotle, he says, the end of labor is leisure. In other words, we work for pleasure. Work is the means to an end. So according to this way of thinking, the secret is to work smart, isn't it? It doesn't matter that we don't enjoy our work. The key is to make as much money as we can, save up as much money as we can, and then enjoy a life of pleasure. Well, that's how the new movement called FIRE came about, isn't it? Have you heard of it? FIRE. Financial independence, retire early. Work and invest. Gain financial independence and then retire early. Do whatever you want in life. Enjoy all the pleasures in life. Is that the secret to happiness at work? This question is such a common one that even UC Berkeley, right, a premier university in the United States, promises to settle this question in the name of science. Now, for $500, you can attend a 3-month course called The Science of Happiness at Work. Now, this course, right, they promise us penetrating scientific insights into what will make us happy at work. Now, I took a look at their brochure, and they say the secret boils down to 4 things: purpose, engagement, resilience, kindness. Now, I haven't really looked at the details, but I'm willing to bet that this is classic business school jargon meant to make you feel good about your $500, but make no difference whatsoever to your life. How do we find happiness at work? Now, if the solution is simply found through a $500 university course, or an advice of a billionaire, or a wise guru, why do the overwhelming majority of people surveyed consistently say that they're unhappy with work? Well, we don't have to be working that long, right, to figure out that happiness at work is not found in our passion or pleasure, isn't it? Because if it's all about passion, well, then just ask your friends who are teachers. That initial joy and passion of helping kids. Ask them, is it still there? Or has it been crushed by the suffocating chores of admin, the burden of bureaucracy? Ask your friends who are doctors. That initial joy and passion of helping others, serving others. Something they all say in the medical interview. Ask them if it's still there. In fact, the data suggests that more than 50% of doctors are absolutely jaded with their work. And they're just in it for the money. Now, keep that in mind the next time you go to your GP clinic. If it's all about passion, why are Olympians and elite athletes, people who are undoubtedly the most passionate in what they do, Simone Biles, Naomi Osaka, why are they burnt out and struggling with mental health? Now, it doesn't take a lot to figure out that it's not really about passion, is it? The same can be said about pleasure. Now, if our work is a means to pleasure, well, just ask the retirees, right? Or better still, live with a retiree. Are they happier or grumpier? Now, personally, I can give you an answer to that, but at the risk of offending my parents and my in-laws, I'll keep my mouth shut. How do we find happiness at work? Friends, I want to say that, amidst all the different opinions and the perspectives out there, God gives us an answer. And the answer he provides not only makes sense to us cognitively, it also relates to us experientially and emotionally. Now, 3 things today: the Bible's realism with work, the Bible's reasons for the troubles at work, and the Bible's resolution to the problems at work. Now, let's look at how it begins. The Bible's realism with our work. Now, they say the best way to understand someone is to have experienced the same things for yourself. Now, that's exactly what we find in the passage that we just read. God relates to us through a very interesting story. It's the story of the king of Jerusalem. Now, who was this king, right? He was at one point the richest and the most powerful and the most successful man in ancient history. Now, this is the king's own account, his own reflections. Now, having accomplished all that there is to accomplish at work, he tells us whether he has found happiness. Now, let's look at what it says. Look at his description of his work in verse 4, the sentence starting with the number 4. This is his JD, right? This is his job description. He says, I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. Our author, this king, he was a master builder. He was an ancient version of a tycoon developer and a rock star architect put together. It was an ancient version of Quek Ling Bing and Moshe Stafti combined. He undertook great projects, equivalent to the jewel at Changi Airport, equivalent to the gardens by the bay. This is his job description. This is his resume. He undertook great projects that were prospering and thriving. But look what else he tells us. He doesn't only tell us his job description, he tells us the scale of his work. Now, this is what we read in verse 7. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. Now, he didn't only have successful work, he had substantial work. He had the biggest employee head count, right? The biggest equipment count in the entire country. And so, with work on that scale, needless to say, money kept pouring in. That's verse 8. I amassed silver and gold for myself, the treasures of kings and provinces. Gold and silver from all nations flooding to him. He was doing cross-border trades. He was closing blockbuster deals. He was literally swimming in cash. His work was flourishing. His work was prospering. Already we start to get a sense of where this is all going, isn't it? But that's not all. With this kind of wealth, he splurged on entertainment, from the outrageous to the obnoxious. That's the next verse. Male and female singers, the latest pop stars at his beck and call. Call girls and concubines 24/7. This guy, he didn't hold back. He did stuff that makes Hugh Hefner and the Wolf of Wall Street looks like child's play. There was no self-control. He partied like there was no tomorrow. But the amazing thing is this. As he enjoyed these things, look at verse 9. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this, my wisdom stayed with me. Even in the excesses and the extravagance of his lifestyle, he maintained his wisdom. Even after late nights of indulgences and licentiousness, he was still able to go back to work the next morning to strategize and supervise, to inspire and innovate. Friends, he had them all. Work that was thriving and flourishing, a business empire that was growing and prospering. You know, if his business empire was listed on the stock market, it would be the darling of every investor. It would be constantly featured on CNBC, right? Bloomberg, Forbes, you name it. Kinokuniya would have his books plastered on the bestsellers list year after year. Case studies of his business successes, right, will be studied all the way from the universities down all the way to the primary schools. And that's not all. He won't only be popular in the business world, he'll be the icon and the idol of Hollywood, right, with this kind of lifestyle. He'll constantly be on Entertainment Tonight. He'll be on every late night talk show. If you ask anybody and everybody who they think the happiest person in the world is, all of them will point the finger to him. And that's what we read in the next verse, verse 10, when he says, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor. Can you imagine what it takes to utter those very words? It's mind-boggling, isn't it? Surely, if anybody is qualified to say that he's happy at work, it must be him. But therein lies the twist in the story. Therein lies the biggest shock of it all. Look at what he concludes in verse 11. Yet, when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had thought to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Yet, but, now this must be the biggest but, right, in all of history. Like a wise man who looks back and reflects on all that he has done, he concludes with brutal honesty, with surprising clarity, the stark reality that everything was meaningless, chasing after the wind. Now, you know, I have 3 children, right? 3 young boys. And, you know, back in the day when we could still go freely to the beach, they would love to go to the beach in Sentosa to build sandcastles. They love to do that. And oh boy, you know, they would go with all their gusto and with all their excitement. They'll bring all their toys, all their equipment, and all the pails, right? And what they would do is to shovel sand into the pails, fill them up, pack them in, flip them up on top of one another, and start building sandcastles. Stack them up. They will build higher and higher and higher until the inevitable happens. A wave comes in and washes it all away. That's what our author means when he says that everything was meaningless. It doesn't only mean a pursuit that is not fulfilling and not satisfying. It also portrays something that is fleeting, like vapor, like mist, like a sandcastle. One moment here, another moment gone. It's a futile and fleeting pursuit. Trying to find happiness at work in all these things, that's as pointless as chasing after the wind. That's as futile as building sandcastles on the beach. And friends, you know, if we're honest with ourselves, we know this from experience, isn't it? You know, we spend our time at work, achieving our goals, hitting our targets, climbing the ladder, becoming more recognized, respected, rewarded. We make more money for ourselves, we grow our bank account, we feel happy for a little while, and then what next? But the same can be said for our pleasure, right? Our leisure. We enjoy the things life has to offer. The whining and the dining, the holidays and the hobbies. We enjoy them for a little while, and then one takes. What's the point? Now, lest you think this is just my opinion, listen to what Brad Pitt has to say. Now, we all know Brad Pitt, right? That famous American actor. Now, he was interviewed many years back by the Rolling Stone magazine about the American dream. And he said this in my best American accent. He said, "Man, I know all these things are supposed to seem important to us. The car, the condo, our version of success. But if that's the case, why do I feel I'm headed for a dead end, a numbing of the soul? Yes, the emphasis now is on success and personal gain. I'm sitting on it and I'm telling you, that's not it. I'm the guy who's got everything, I know. But I'm telling you, once you've got everything, then you're just left with yourself. It's isolated and lonely there. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. It doesn't help you sleep any better, and you don't wake up any better because of it." Now, there's a saying, meaninglessness does not come from being weary of pain. It comes from being weary of pleasure. Mind you, friends, what we have seen today is not some, perverse way of illustrating the Maslow hierarchy of needs. This is not some midlife crisis. No, the meaninglessness of all these things is a sign to us. It screams to us that our work and the pleasures derived from our work is not all that there is. This is the reality of life. The Bible is realistic to tell us that our work in and of itself cannot grant us lasting happiness. Unlike all the idealized perspectives of work, the Bible shows us that realistically, there is a dark side to our work. There is a brokenness to our work. And so this brings us to the key question. If the reality is that our work is broken and empty and meaningless, why is that the case? Now, the Bible gives us the reason. That's our second point. And the reason is because of our sin. You see, that's because God created the world. And God created the world good, with good things for us to enjoy, such as our work. So that we are meant to work in this world under the good rule of God. But the problem is, we don't want to live under the good rule of God, isn't it? We reject God. Now, this is what the Bible calls sin. Right? Sin is not so much, the bad things we do, but rather sin is fundamentally our attitude towards God that says, sorry, God, I don't need you in my life. I want to call the shots. I want to live life my own way. It's all about ourselves, myself. Now, in fact, this is what our author, this is what he shows us. Now, you see how many times our author speaks about himself? He says, I undertook, I built, I made, I amassed, I owned. It's all about himself, right? Me, myself, and I. It's self-love to the extremes. Nothing to do with others, and worse, nothing to do with God. That is what sin is. We live for ourselves and not for God. But not only that, we also take the good things that God has given us, such as our work, and we put them in place of God. We make the good things of our work into the God thing. We make our lives all about our work and nothing to do with God. Now, put it another way, we take the good gifts that God has given us, but we reject the giver of the gifts, God himself. You know, the tragedy is that if we don't want to have anything to do with God, the consequence is that he withdraws himself from us, isn't it? But think about it. The absence of everything good that God is, it's just the presence of everything bad, isn't it? Worse, God in his justice, he punishes rebellion. That's why there's pain, that's why there's sickness, that's why there's death all around us in our world today. That's why our work is broken and cursed. The brokenness and the dysfunction in our world, in our work, is a huge sign to us, telling us that our world is not meant to be this way. The Bible is not only realistic in relating to us, our experiences at work, it also gives us the reason why as well. God tells us the reason why our work is unhappy and painful is because of our sin. We've made it all about ourselves. We've taken the good gifts that God has given us, but we reject the giver. We've made the good thing of our work into the God thing. What's the solution then? Well, you might be surprised to know that our author, right, despite how pessimistic and even nihilistic he comes across, he gives us the answer. He tells us in his concluding remarks. That's our final point, right? Look with me at verse 24. A person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. This too, I see, is from the hand of God. For without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? Now, if the problem is in our rejection of God, the solution, the resolution then must be to turn back to him. And you see, that's what our author is saying. Right? When he says that a person can do nothing better, it means the very best thing that somebody can do is to enjoy his own work. Now that's quite the opposite of everything that he's said before, isn't it? But that's why the very next line is critical. The enjoyment, the happiness, the satisfaction in our work can only be found when one acknowledges that these good things, they come from the hand of God. In other words, the gifts can only be enjoyed when we turn to the giver of the gifts, God himself. Friends, this means that, in order to find true happiness at work, we need to turn away from our sinful and self-centered ways. And instead, we need to turn to God, back into relationship with him, to acknowledge him, to live for him. Now, allow me to be clear, right, that acknowledging God and living for him doesn't mean that all the problems that we face in the world will disappear immediately. Right? It doesn't mean all our troubles at work will simply vanish. It doesn't mean we will get a promotion tomorrow or a pay raise. We won't. And praise God that we won't, because God is not a vending machine. God is not the genie in Aladdin. He's not beholden to what we do or how we respond. Our problems won't go away because we still live in a world that is plagued with sin. God has not promised to fix our little problems in our world immediately. Instead, what God has done is to fix our problem of sin ultimately. And that is far greater. You see, the heart of the Christian message is that God has sent his son Jesus into the world to take the punishment of our sins upon himself. So that instead of us having to suffer the consequences of our sin, Jesus did on our behalf. And because of what Jesus has done, if we receive this solution, we can now be back in a relationship with God. Now, being restored with God in a relationship is far greater, because unlike our work, God is the true source of happiness. God is the true source of meaning. Can you see how this is so much greater? The Bible's realism of work assures us that God knows what we experience. But the Bible's reason and resolution to our work also comforts us that God has provided the ultimate solution to our troubles at work. You know, we spend slightly more than 1/3 of our lives at work. What a thought, isn't it? 90,000 hours of our lives. The overwhelming majority of our waking lives will be spent at work. If there is at all a solution to the question of happiness at work, wouldn't it be of the utmost importance we get this right? If what we say today is true, if we sincerely believe that it is, can I urge you to consider this for yourself? Can I urge you to find out more? You may have more questions on this. You may be wondering how we can be so certain about this. You may have questions on the Bible or on Jesus. We'd love to answer these questions. We'd love to provide you avenues to find out more. Chat with your friend who invited you. Right, come for the talk that we have on this Sunday. Better still, come for the course called Christianity Explored, which we'll run. Right, this course that helps us explore in a very relaxed setting what Christianity is all about. Let's seek to find real and satisfactory answers so that we make the most of our life here on earth in our work. Time to end. Now, as we end, allow me to share this interview that I heard a few years ago by the former CEO of Tesco and chairman of Vodafone. Now, you know, Tesco is that big supermarket chain in Europe, right? And Vodafone, the big telecommunications company in Europe as well. He held both positions. Now, he was, by almost all measure, a very successful man in his work. But when asked about his own reflections about his work and his accomplishments, he was brutally honest. He said this: "I wouldn't say I was an absentee father, but my wife really brought the children up. I'm not sure I got that right. I worked huge hours. Some weeks I leave home at 5 or 6 in the morning and I come home at 9 o'clock at night. I guess I can say the kids enjoy the fruits of my success, but is that the be-all and end-all of life? No one has ever lain on their deathbed saying, if only I had spent more time at work." Our work may be our passion. Our work may bring us pleasure. But no one has ever lain on their deathbed saying, if only I had spent more time at work. This businessman has testified to that. Brad Pitt, Raw Ting, our king in Jerusalem have all testified to that. They've exposed the dead ends to these worldviews. These worldviews that leave us nothing but emptiness and meaninglessness. Friends, we were made for God and not for our work. Blaise Pascal, the world-famous scientist and mathematician, he said, "There is a God-shaped hole in the heart of each man which cannot be satisfied by any created thing, but only by God, the Creator." That is so true, isn't it? Let's find God. Let's find God so that we can find our rest and our joy in Him.